Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We talk everything animation here, including Undone, which we'll be getting into right now. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Michelle Anderer.
Hello.
Alex Bonilla.
Hola.
Sam Quattro.
Hello.
And Sarah Potter.
Hello.
Today we are talking Season 1 of the new Amazon Prime TV series Undone, created by Bob-Waksberg and Kate Purdy. It came out yesterday on Amazon and is 8 episodes. Very interesting, distinctive new series done in rotoscope animation. Maybe the first rotoscope thing we've talked about on the podcast. I think we've had like an article before on it on the website. But yeah, we talk a bunch of animated shows here at overlyanimated.com. Check us out there on iTunes or your favorite podcast app by searching Overly Animated, or on our YouTube at youtube.com/overlyanimated. I'm going to do a general spoiler warning now because I think it's going to be hard to talk about this show without getting into spoilers. So big spoiler warning right now for Undone. If you want to know whether you should check it out, I'm just going to say all of us probably liked it to a varying extent, so you should watch it. There's your recommendation. But we're going to get into spoilers right away for Undone, all 8 episodes on Amazon now. So go watch it, come back, and listen. There's a lot to get into here, but I just want overall impressions. How'd you like the show? What do you have expectations? Were they met? What do you think of the rotoscoping? Michelle?
So when I saw the promo trailer, I didn't really know what to think. It just felt like a lot of interesting visuals happening, and it looked really wild. And I was just kind of like, okay, let's see what this is. And having watched the show, I'd say like I actually like it a lot more now that I know what it is about and what it's trying to do. And I'm not sure that trailer really did a great job explaining the good aspects of the show, but it definitely covered how visually kind of crazy it gets sometimes. But no, I genuinely like this show. I feel like I will say I had like a really weird experience watching it for the first maybe 4 or 5 episodes, because it just like made me so uncomfortable. But I feel like that's just because like Alma's whole situation is very uncomfortable, and it kind of like makes you feel all sorts of ways, and that's like on purpose. And I think it's like a good part of the storytelling that it kind of like forces you to like not always be having a great time with it. Like this show isn't really here to be like chill and fun and relaxing, that's for sure. And I honestly think like that's part of the appeal for me. I think a lot of the characters I really enjoyed a lot, especially just the fact that like everyone's so messy. There is no like objectively good or bad person in this show, I would say, like at all. And I think it's kind of wonderful that we get to a place where like we can kind of see a lot of sides of people, even if we disagree strongly more with some of them than others. Like I love all that stuff so much, and I feel like for me that's one of my highlights of the show. And like honestly, it's like hard to compare this to a lot of other shows because it very much feels like its own like extremely strong flavor, and I can't say that about a lot of things we watch. So I mean, it's just an interesting show, but like I'd say like of what I've heard from your guys' takes, like I might be more positive on it than some of you.
Okay, I mean, you're the first to go here,
I'm
so
also the first
you're
one,
referencing
so like,
takes that haven't. You're referencing opinions that haven't happened yet in a very non-linear fashion.
I've seen them on Discord to
Whoa.
varying extents.
Michelle's already seen the other opinions go by in her head about the
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
She jumped into our memories already.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a great take to start us off, Michelle. It's a very distinctive show, and yeah, that's I think probably the most distinctive thing we've ever covered here on the podcast. Okay, Alex, how about you? What did you think of Undone?
So first of all, the positives. It is a very visually captivating show. Again, like rotoscoping is a method that isn't used that often due to just how precise it needs to be in order to look good. And I think that this show really hits it well, especially when it gets to the fantasy sequences, is where you can tell, like, okay, like this is why animation is here for to represent these kind of high concept stuff. Rosa Salazar as Alma and Bob Odenkirk as her dad are both really good in terms of their acting and their chemistry and bouncing off of each other. Rosa especially gets a lot of like good humor out of the. Like, this isn't really a comedy, but when she gets to have jokes, they're usually very welcome. So I appreciate that. Now, as for like my experience watching it, for a lot of it, I felt kind of empty, kind of like I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be getting out of this. I understand if it feels like it's towing a very dangerous line between this being full sci-fi fantasy and making parallels with mental illness. So that was a struggle throughout the show. And in general, now that I've had as people saw among like the group chats we had, I was initially very angry when I finished the show. Like, for some reason, it just left me with a very strange energy after finishing it. 24 hours later, I don't know if this is exactly the reason why, but this does hit a lot of personal notes for me in terms of an overbearing Latina mother and coming from a family that gaslights you into believing mental illness is the reason that you're not fitting into this life that they want for you. And so those are many things that Rosa goes through in this. Alma goes through in this show are things that I have struggled with for many years. So seeing a show actually deal with that and putting it in the light of, no, this is like a superpower in a way, feels just very, very strange to me. And like it will take me longer than this 24 hours to like truly come to terms with like how I actually feel about it. But right now, it's just personally, it's a very complicated relationship I have with the way they're dealing with the themes that they're touching here. And because of the fact that it feels more on the side of fantasy to me, at the end, I don't feel like I really got anything out of the experience. So my summary would be that it's a visually interesting piece of media, but I'm not sure that it's one that necessarily has a strong enough message for me to want to rewatch. So that would be my take right now.
Okay, awesome stuff on how you connected to it, and yeah, I'll have comments on that last thing when we get to me. Okay, Sam, what's your take right now on Undone?
I liked it a lot.
Yay!
Yes. Going into the show, I was like, okay, the trailer didn't really impress me that much. Like, what is this? It kind of looks like, ambitious rotoscoped animation show that is just going to be like trippy and surreal for no reason. I'm not really into that. But then, I actually watched it, and I really like the slice of life aspect to it. Like, those are my favorite kinds of shows where it's just, woman lives and does things and has like a tumultuous relationship with her sister and her family and is kind of a fuck up. I love those kinds of shows. Those are my favorite kinds of shows. So I was like, okay, I'm on board. As for like the surreal stuff, I thought it was interesting. Like Alex was saying, sort of how it spins schizophrenia into being like a superpower, which I also felt weird about and felt like, I'm not sure if this is what you want to say, but it is what it is. But I don't know. I really liked how it wasn't afraid to go into a lot of depths with mental health issues and just like what life is. Alma is such like an amazing character, and I love her, even though like I've spent only 8 episodes with her so far. I just think that she's wonderful, and she like speaks her mind, and she's quick to point out, the bullshit in life, which I'm all for. It was just a treat to watch for me. It was like all the different elements that I like. It was serious, it was funny, It was very artistic. While I didn't really lash too much onto the rotoscoping at first, I thought it looked really weird. It looked almost LA Noir-esque in terms of,
Oh
this
God.
face. Yeah, it looked like, oh yeah, this face doesn't really match with this body, and it looks weird. But I got over that, and it was just wonderful. I think it had me hooked the entire 8 episodes. And that's all you can really ask for a show, I guess. Just the hook you, take you on a journey. Why not?
Nice. Okay, Sam loved it. Love that. Sarah, what about you? What'd you think of Undone?
I really, really liked watching it. I'm like, okay.
Typically that means you like the show if you liked watching it.
Yes, but I'm still not like 100% sure what my feelings of it are. Like that's what I'm trying to be careful with here. Like I really liked it, and I think everyone should watch it. Like I really do think that, but I completely understand like takes like Alex's where like he didn't like it. Like I get it because this show is just so out there and doesn't give you hard answers on a lot of things. Like I don't want to explain why you don't like Alex. I'm just talking like from my own like what I saw. I'm not saying this is why you didn't like it. I'm just saying like there's a lot of stuff.
Also,
here.
Alex liked it, but yeah.
But I mean, like, it's not that the show is complicated. It's just dense. There is a lot here. And if you're not, like, ready for this ride, I can totally see, like, just being left behind by it. But I was on this ride the whole time. It was enjoyable. I was surprised most by, like, just how funny it was and just how good all the characters are. I had a lot of similar experiences to Alex watching this in that I definitely related to a lot of what the mother was doing specifically, the gaslighting a lot, and just the way she was acting. But the thing I really enjoyed most is that just all the characters, even when they were clearly, like, as a viewer, were like, this person's not a great person, they still, like, it wasn't because people were malicious. It was because people were bad at communication. And that's just such a real representation of how family abuse happens and stuff like that. This isn't like BoJack's mom. This is just a real mom who wants to do the best for her children, and she's just never like gone across that gap to reach them in a way that has landed correctly. And she's not a malicious person. I fully believe that she loves her children and wants the best for them, but she's going about it the wrong way, and she doesn't fully understand that, and that's kind of sad and like tragic. And I think this show is just really, really interesting. I really liked it. And to touch on the animation really quick, I do think that the almost uncanny nature of it was on purpose, because you're like, this show would not have worked in live action. Just this disconnect between the characters, how they're talking to each other, and the backgrounds of what's actually happening is like so important to what's happening. Like you're never sure what's real, and you're never sure what's you're never sure what's actually happening, and that's just such an important part of what's happening in the show. And I just love it. It's so good. Like this art style is not necessarily like it does get uncanny, but I think it does it in service of the show.
Yes. Okay. Nice. I don't blame anyone for having not fully developed thoughts yet, because the show is extremely complicated. So I really, really, really love Undone. I think it's incredible. I had high expectations. It was my most anticipated show of the year. And, upon first viewing, it was like complicated experience, I think, for a lot of reasons a lot of people are saying. I still really liked it. I think what stood out to me immediately are the kind of fantasy sequences, when the rotoscoping is made more use of. I think those are like the more obviously brilliant parts of the show. Kind of like what episode 2 gets into, which I think is the second best episode of the show. Just like the way sequences can move into each other, and when she's in space and stuff, it's just absolutely gorgeous. One of the most visually distinctive shows I've ever seen. So I think those are and I still think those are the best parts, are kind of the more out there ones, but it's less about it being like trippy or abstract. It's more about like the character work you can accomplish by melding like memories. I think that's when the show's at its best. It's when it's doing emotional character work by combining a bunch of memories together. This is what episode 5 does, which I think is brilliant. Alone in This You Have Me, I think it's the standout episode of the show. It gets into a lot of different people's memories and experiences, and that's like when the show's at its best. Episode 5 is also incredibly multicultural, and the show in general is so diverse. I was able to rewatch the show this morning. I have a second viewing in, and that was an experience. I actually think the show is incredibly rewatchable, and I'd highly recommend that. Because on the second viewing, I kind of I had a different perspective. So the biggest hang up, I think, on Undone is what other people have said, which is that there's this notion that schizophrenia is not just mental illness. It's seeing the world in a different realm. And
is that what people viewed it as? Because I didn't get that on
that's debatable.
Let me. So the dad is he basically says that explicitly. That's what his research is about. I'm not saying that's what the show is explicitly saying, but it poses that question. I think the biggest flaw with the show is the show thinks that is an intellectually interesting question, and I disagree with that. I don't really think that's intellect. I think there are parts of it that are intellectually interesting, and the show does focus on them. This notion that indigenous shamans might have been treated as schizophrenic in our society, and maybe they really are just seeing things in a different way. I think that is pretty interesting, and the show does a lot with that. In general, though, it's really hard to swallow when Alma is probably schizophrenic and having thinking that she's seeing things in a different realm. But the show doesn't have a firm perspective on it. So you can watch the show in a bunch of different ways. I was hung up on this the first viewing. This made me think it was great in a lot of ways, but with some big caveats. The second viewing, I rewatched it from the perspective of Alma is mentally ill. The whole way through, that's what I was thinking. And it worked. You can watch it that way.
Yeah.
And there's extreme, less than a handful of things that don't make sense. Most things you can come up with an explanation for in that she is mentally ill. And, that was a much better viewing experience for me. And I bet you can watch the show and think that she's has superpowers, and it would also be it would totally work. That's really interesting. I think the show's obviously intentionally vague with its ending. It has an open-ended ending, and it invites different perspectives on viewing, and that's intentional by its subject matter and what it's getting into. It works with the nonlinearness. I love that about it. I'm probably going to rewatch it a third time, a fourth time. I think this is going to hold up as it's an experience, a really interesting thing to watch from different perspectives, and it is really unique.
That's really interesting because my first watch through, I was definitely watching the whole time thinking, is she mentally ill or is this real? And I thought that was the core thing of the entire season. I thought that was the final thing asked in the final episode. They ask, the show poses to you to think is this real? Did she?
That's the main question of the season. I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think I watched the whole time thinking I think she's mentally ill, and I think that just colored the way I liked it or not. I thought it was just great from that perspective.
I think it works better from that perspective personally, but I'm also biased against the notion that schizophrenia is seeing things from different worlds.
Well, see, and I think that's where the disconnect is happening, because I did watch this from the idea of, okay, so this is some power she's unlocking, and people outside are viewing this as mental illness when it's not. That's the way that I watched it. And I did do a rewatch, and there's still enough things to tell me that, okay, this isn't a fully mental illness. I can't buy it. They didn't do enough for me to buy into the alternate interpretation. I know that it's trying to get there, but there's just too much stuff for me to say okay, you can view this from two different lenses and it still works. So I think that's where my hesitance comes from the fact that I can't see this as actually being interpreted as mental illness, but rather using mental illness almost as a facade or as a trick to to hide the fact, to do in the show, use it as to hide that this is actually a power.
But I think that's valid. But I think the thing is that for me, when I'm watching everything, that anytime we're in Alma's perspective, you just can't trust anything that's happening, even what people that you think are quote unquote real are saying. There's no point where we can say I think one of the few times that you're supposed to be oh, she's really doing something is when she's talking to that guard and Sam's there, and Sam's wow, how'd you do that? We can't be 100% sure that that was a real conversation that happened. How can we be sure? There's so much here that you have to and I understand that that's not a great explanation for you out, you can't read it that way. That's such a big scene, but it's we can't be sure, and that's the problem with deciding what's going on here. because we only have Alma's perspective.
Yeah, I think that there's no way to like read it completely one way or the other, and that's intentional by the show. Like, I think there's things purposefully there for both sides of this reading, which, like, it wants to be vague. Like, it wants to have things that it doesn't like. So I think episode 6 is the one time when you don't see things from Alma's perspective. That episode's all about, I think it's like a great episode. That's the only episode where the dad's not in, cause like we're not seeing it through her perspective. Yeah. We're not seeing the dad, and we're seeing a bunch of other people see how they're seeing her. And that guard scene is really interesting. I mean, I think we shouldn't get too hung up on it, but the only thing that like really isn't explained, I feel like, is how she knows the name, but it could have been written on one of the sticky notes. Like, I think you can come up with an explanation and have that be real. She's just like intuiting stuff, and obviously there are pictures.
There's another moment when she confronts her mom at the end. She's like, "I knew you were the person that
this
broke
is the one thing that doesn't make sense."
Yeah,
this is the one thing that can't be explained. I think.
I mean, it can be explained. Again, it could just be, she's assuming that that's what happened, and she happened to be right.
Right. She intuited it, or she investigated it off screen, and we didn't see it. Like there, it's just that there's no on screen explanation, at least. But like that's the distinctive moment for the
Yeah, like, because what this could be is that she's actually investigating real life, and like she's like reading papers, and like her schizophrenia is like making it real. Like, it's making it like she's envisioning herself like actually in the night, essentially, as she's reading through her dad's papers. Because we don't see her looking at the stuff from the attic as much later in the season. But I think I assumed that she was still reading it, and like that a lot of the information she's learning is actually learned from the papers, and her mind is creating these scenes for her as she's reading through them.
The most interesting thing I noticed from this viewpoint, the second viewing of like everything is Alma making stuff up in her head, is that at least the first few times when she sees her dad, the vision of her dad is based on a memory or something she saw of him. Like, so the first time she sees her dad, he appears in the road smoking. That was after she saw the picture of him smoking earlier in the episode. So she's creating it based on that. The second time in the second episode, she sees him, he's reading a newspaper after she remembers him sitting reading a newspaper in that like Halloween, or in that memory before Halloween. The show is like intentionally doing stuff like that, in order to like make you question if, and so then it kind of takes off from there, I guess, in her head. But like, I think this is totally a valid reading of the show that's intended like for this to be one of the possible readings. But also, I think they want you to have the possibility of reading it as she really is, unlocking this different perspective and going through nonlinear time and stuff like that. And I think that's also really the point being the show's intention, I think, is to support both viewpoints. I'm pretty confident in that.
Yeah, and I think like specifically like episodes 2 and like 3 become kind of really hard to process if it is mental illness, because like you do see she does process things that are way like out in like different orders that don't really make sense otherwise.
Right, and it's at times we're stuck in Alma's perspective are difficult. Also, in episode 5, she's seeing Sam's memories. Like, it's like, how is that happening? Well, Sam told her earlier, and she's just thinking about it, right? So
like, I just think it's possible that Sam told her these things.
Yeah,
like,
that's my reading on it. Yeah,
because like if I know I didn't live with Cade when he was like a kid, but I know a lot about his childhood. Like, I think that's pretty normal.
Yeah, and I think it fits with like we have false memories of things that like our parents told us from like when we were 2 or something, and we remember them happening, but we didn't really remember them. We just remember like someone telling us about them. I think that show could be an interesting memory things and stuff like that. Sam, how about you? What like kind of were you viewing it as the show went on, and what do you think of this idea that the show is like inviting different ways you can view it?
I don't know. I was a fan of the ambiguity of like, oh, is this just like the schizophrenia? Is it like actually happening? I was a big fan of that. And honestly, I only watched it once. That's all I had time for.
Yeah, I mean, it's the day after it came out. But
yeah. But I kind of was viewing it as a puzzle piece, where it's like, oh, I want to figure out what's happening here. And the show didn't really answer that, and I was okay. It can be this kind of unclear, unknown sort of thing, but, the emotions and the, I guess, effect of what's happening still hits, like, my heart. You know what I mean? So, for me, that sort of thing, like, oh, can I read it one way? Can I read it another? Like, it doesn't matter which, personally, because what matters is how Alma feels and what happened that Halloween night. And, whether it be her investigating or whether it be her going back in time and seeing it, she figured it out. And, it could be false memories, could be this, that, and the other. And I think that's kind of like a great commentary on life in general. Because, you keep living and then you keep adding days onto your memory and then you just can't remember stuff like you used to. So maybe you do construct like a different sort of reaction to, I don't know, your dad dying or how you felt this, that, and the other when you were a kid. And I really like that aspect of it. I like that it didn't give me all the answers to what was going on. And honestly, I think it's like the first time I've really felt that way about a piece of media where I liked kind of being in the dark because it made me feel like I was where Alma is, like I was like with the show the entire time. I wasn't just like a rando watching this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you like the ambiguity because it tapped into Alma's perspective and what she was going through.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, yeah. I mean, she is such a strong character. I'll get to her in a second, but one thing I think is interesting, if you view it as just mental illness for Alma, like, yes, she figures out mom broke into the lab. This twist at the end with the dad wasn't actually killed. He killed himself and his assistant / I think he was having an affair with her. But I think there's one scene that makes that apparent. But that could be constructed. There's no evidence that the dad actually did that. Like, that was just her remembering it. So if it was all fake, then that might not be true. I think no character really confirms that.
I think we're getting a little hung up on this aspect of the show. I think that's why Sam enjoys it. And I kind of feel Sam's perspective on that because I feel like the schizophrenia question of is that what it is, or is it a superpower, or is it both, and what's real? That is like the means through which like everything else happens. But at the core, I'd say it's more about like Alma's at this crossroads in her life. She doesn't want to commit to her partner, Sam. She doesn't have a super great relationship with her sister, Becca. And she has a lot of conflict with her mom, Camilla. And she has these lingering memories of a father who seemed great to her because he stuck up for her a lot. And like, she's just like not in a great place in life. So I feel like the fact that her schizophrenia symptoms start manifesting and she's like potentially like changing keys in different time zones, like that's all great. But I feel like the reason it doesn't matter if we know the answer to that is because like the real question at the heart of this series is not like answering that. It's figuring out like, is Alma going to move like closer to her family and start picking up some of those broken pieces and like understanding them better and having them try to understand her better, knowing that she has a severe mental illness, or is she going to push them farther away? And I feel like that question of is she going to get closer or farther away from them as a result of this mental illness is like the real question of the show. And like the ending seems to be relatively uplifting on that point, like with her mom calling her sister, her meeting her in the desert, being like, we're going to drive back together. So I feel like that is like ultimately like the thing I wanted answered, the thing that I care about, the thing that feels really real in the whole show. And that's what I got. And so, like, I really don't care if the other stuff gets answered because I don't think that's the point.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, I don't think
agree.
that's the point of the show, guys.
Okay, I think that is a valid perspective, and I agree that's kind of the
right perspective.
Well, okay, I agree. It's the emotional core. I definitely think like Raphael and Kate would love the discussion we're having about whether this is totally what they're intending. Is like, was it real? Was it that? Like, I like that. This is a big.
Like, was it real? I mean,
no, I think you're right that it's like the characters aspect of the show is about what you're saying, but also this is just such a huge part of the show. Like, this is like a big thing of what it's about. Like the plot question hanging over the season. Like,
but again, the reason we care about that is what it means when she like makes a different decision with the character.
Right. I think they're both
the
important. You know, the emotional stuff is important, and the stuff is important to the show.
They're both important, but I wouldn't think that they're equally important.
I think from the show's perspective, they're equally important. But you know, you're right that we shouldn't get too hung up on this question. There are other aspects of the show to talk about.
But I mean, I think this is interesting because like when I first finished the show, like I just like the screen went black and like the show is over and we have the sun coming up right after the sun comes up over Alma's face. Like I remember like the show ended and I literally had no idea, like it was completely ambiguous what happened. And I remember in my head thinking like, I don't care what the end
Yeah,
is. Like
exactly.
I don't care. And it was such like a weird reaction to the show, but it wasn't bad. Like I didn't care whether it was real or not. And I think that emotion is really like what it feels like that's what they were going for. Just
That's
not
what I'm
caring what's
saying.
real.
Yeah.
Like I see what Michelle's saying because it's less about like not it doesn't matter what it's real or not. It's that Alma
She's gonna be okay.
Alma
She has
had
her
this
family.
experience.
Yeah.
Alma had this experience, and whether it was real or not, she did X things, and she went through this formative moment.
Mhm.
And yes, there could have been some magic involved, and I'm not 100% sold one way or the other. And now I'm at this point, like 24 hours later, where I'm just like digging into it, and that's why I'm interested whether it's real or not. But like in that moment, as it ended, which was like almost this like just this like moment where I like just did not care. Like it just felt so good and interesting and different. 'Cause I've never felt that way about a show. Just like not wanting more answers and just caring about that like expression she had on her face. Like it's so different from other shows.
Yeah, I think the show is definitely intending the ambiguity. I think like that's like a big, and I don't think it's like wants you to end and like think like, oh no, I want to, I don't know. So
Yeah.
I think it is interesting. Yeah, so we could talk more about the mental illness. I mean, how about Sam? How about how the show handles mental illness, not just from the perspective of like, what's happening to Alma, but like that, and then also like her family history with it, the twist that her dad got diagnosed with schizophrenia. Do you think that like it's interesting that like this is potentially a representation of mental illness, this like abstract visuals, the type of thing that we get? How do you think all this happens in the show?
I mean, I think societally I would count it as a representation because you have her mom just like waving her pills in her face.
Yeah, and then there's the whole episode when she goes to therapy and gets her mom forces the prescription to be filled.
Yeah, I don't know. I liked it. I think it's hard to think about because I don't directly have schizophrenia, so I can't one-to-one relate to it, but I can one-to-one relate to being like, oh, this is bullshit. I'm not mentally ill. Why do I have to take pills? Why do I have to do this, that, and the other when society is like, blah, 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 blah. Like we can go on and on about that. And on that, I think it succeeded in portraying not somebody in denial, but somebody who doesn't think that there's anything wrong with them.
Yeah.
And, she hurts other people, and it sucks. And, she fucks up her sister's wedding that one time.
Yeah.
And she breaks up with her boyfriend, but the boyfriend doesn't remember, and he is, like, an asshole about it, and he doesn't. Never mind. You know what I mean. But, I don't know. It's just, I thought it was good. I thought it was more real than a lot of other portrayals, I would say. Not that there's been that many. If you go and look for movies about mental illness or shows about mental illness, it's like,
Sam, can I compare this to Russian Doll kind of, because that's like a similar show where it's like the characters have some kind of power, but like the other characters are interpreting it as mental illness, and so the show is kind of dealing with like how the main character comes to terms with that and like how other people are seeing her issues, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree that the show and Russian Doll are kind of similar, but I think Russian Doll is less ambiguous.
Right.
It's more solid, like, oh, this is the same day happening over and over again, because, we have, what's his face? Not Charlie. Is that his name? That's his actor's name. Whatever the dude's name is from Russian Doll, because we have him also experiencing the same thing. So I feel like they're different in that regard. But yeah, I do agree that there is that similar thing of, we see a different side because we're following this character and we know what they're going through. If we saw them on the outside, we'd be like, oh, I think maybe this person needs some help. But I don't know. I liked it.
Okay.
Is at the end of this whole ramble that I've gone through the past 3 minutes, I like the portrayal of, oh, is this mental illness? Is this not? Hey, you should take your pills. I'm going to call your boyfriend behind your back because you're acting crazy at work.
But I like that because like every moment like she does something that could be mental illness, we take a step back and like a character comments on it. Like, because like when she has that therapy meeting, like, that therapy appointment, like it's really important because it happens at the same time she gets that blackjack game, and the show says, "Hey, this could just be her like trying to distract herself from trauma," and like that's like they do that in some way for every single thing she does, and I think that's just so good that the show is just like, "Hey, this is okay what she's doing. She's just trying to cope." Like this could from the other people's perspective. Like I think that's great.
Something I feel like the show is at the very least really bold with its interpretation of a lot of mental illness things or its perspective on it, because it like dares to question, I think, our society's status quo on how we view mental illness. I think like at the very least it's like I would say it's like extremely bold that it dares pose the question that schizophrenia is like maybe something more than we think it. Like that seems like out there bold. And I like it's and I think it almost it at least convinces you that it's a question that maybe should be asked, considering it's like, how about these other cultures that treated it in different ways? You know, how should that influence us? And I think that's really interesting. But you know, like the fact that it definitely breaks free of kind of how we typically view mental illness, and that is very interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and that it's so refreshing.
Yeah,
to have this, and I like it so much. It's just deep in my heart, like I feel it.
That's good. So with that, I think my next question for everyone is going to be taking a step back. Like, what's your favorite aspect of the show? Would you say that is its view of mental illness?
Yeah. I mean, Alma, just her in general.
Alma, that's also a pilot answer.
But yes, I mean, typical Sam. So Sam things that will make me watch whatever media it is. Mental health, problems, issues, addressing, etc. Gay shit.
Yeah, there's no gay shit in the
that
show,
order.
Yeah, well, gay shit first, and then mental health. It switches.
This is a rare show that Sam loves that does not have any gay shit in it. So.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and like I enjoy thinking about it a lot. It just makes me salivate with excitement.
Okay, that's interesting. Michelle, how about you? What's a character, episode, moment, or aspect of the show that you really loved?
The way our perspective of characters evolved when Alma was able to like either infer or literally see based on what's really happening. I don't know. But especially with characters like, you know, Sam or her mother. Like, I feel like getting more information on them does so much to how you read initial moments that you might react to very strongly and very negatively, and have that kind of shift when you're given this other side to it. And just like the fact that, again, like they're all just like so painfully human in their faults, which is a big part of, I think, what makes it feel so real and grounded and relatable. So that's like just like the characterization and the way that we get information in nuggets and how it changes everything. Like even her dad, like our perspective of Jacob shifting steadily throughout the whole show, I think is like, it's really important for Alma, but it's also like really interesting to see as a viewer. And I feel like, it's all just so good. So like the character stuff for me was my favorite part.
Nice. Alex, how about you? A favorite part of Undone?
I think Alma herself is just a very strong, charming character. Her interactions with her boyfriend are usually pretty fun, but also can get pretty raw. The times that she just talks back and forth with her dad that aren't like expositional scenes are pretty good because they're like much needed pockets of humor in this kind of dense show. So like I appreciate it when we got the chance to just have them back and forth. So and also like the tense moments that she gets to have with her mom like are just very, very relatable. So just Alma in general is a very, very, very strong character, and she's got enough going on her own that like I can totally see like a situation where you'd love this show just for her and nothing else. Like, I think that's possible.
Yeah, I think she's definitely a really strong character. Sarah, how about you? A favorite aspect of
I touched a little bit earlier, and that is the fact that these characters are not like unredeemable like monsters. Like, I think that like BoJack is a great show, but one of the nitpicks I have with it is that like the people that are bad are like almost unredeemable, or they do things that are so like unseparable from like, this is so bad, like I can't see them as like someone I have to deal with in a regular day. But these are people that I've had to deal with my entire life. Like, maybe some of them are family members, some of them are friends, or people that I used to call friends, people I've been with. And it's such a realistic example of how we can be mean to each other without actively trying to be mean to each other. And it's such a, I think, it's important, I think, from that perspective, because like I don't remember seeing a show like this, like where just everybody is not really doing things from, I think, a malicious place. They're really just all trying to be nice to each other. It's just they're all communicating really, really badly. They just can't do it. And that said, and with me saying that, I hate a lot of these characters. And with that said, I still can see that they're not trying to be mean, unlike a lot of people in some other shows who I see as unredeemable and I hate. And I think this is just really important. I like this a lot. I like these characters being really interesting in that way.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great point. I do think the characters here are more like maybe nuanced tonally than BoJack. I think BoJack's mom is like a very realistic portrayal though of like a person.
It's like ramped up to like 11.
Yeah,
and these people really aren't.
Slightly ramped up. Like there's some people like
ramped
that.
up.
There's some
the point
people.
though is that she's ramped up, but everything she says is mean. But this mom, like, she does the right thing sometimes. She clearly has these moments of nice.
She's done a lot. Let's talk about Camilla.
Well, no, okay, she's not going to be the top of our list.
But she's got a lot going on, and I do agree.
Okay, that'll lead into one of my things but I still have to go on my favorite thing. I can talk about that. But yeah, okay, I'll save it for a second. But yeah, I think that's everyone here like is deeply flawed, but still sympathetic. I would say, like, and that's it's really interesting. Here's some deeply flawed characters in terms of my favorite things, but in general, the flashbacks. But I'll rattle off a few things here. Hot take. Alma and Sam in episode 5. I love them. They're so cute in this episode.
I don't think so.
The nuanced portrayal of the two of them is incredible. Like you're so anti-Sam, and then it comes in with like sympathizing flashbacks for his past, and then you see how awesome Alma and him could be together and how they met. I just love that aspect of the show.
It's so hard to hate their relationship after it.
It's so, you come in like, I hate it, I'm done. And then you're like, oh, how do I hate it, right? Like, it's impossible.
Yeah. But it's still, Sam is so horrible. He did such a horrible thing.
Sam definitely does one horrible thing, yeah. It's, Alma also, I would say, like, you're like, the characters are never malicious. I think Alma's, like, pretty malicious in episode 1 with her sister. But she's also extremely sympathetic for other parts of the show. The random thing, the show's use of San Antonio as a setting, I really love that. I think that's really distinctive. Don't think I've seen a show set in San Antonio before, and I think it's
I was gonna say it's not enough San Antonio. There's like 2 scenes of the Riverwalk.
I love the Riverwalk
scene, and that's pretty much it.
That was enough for me. That's the 2 things I know about San Antonio: is the Riverwalk and the Alamo.
Wow.
You know?
Oh my god, the Alamo thing. Oh my
I think culturally, like that's
overall, I'm just saying San Antonio specifically, I wouldn't say gets as much of a spotlight as it should.
Okay, so like culturally, that's how diverse the show is. You know, you get the Latina main characters, and then the indigenous influence in the area as well. And I think that's like really incredible. Alma being deaf, this is an aspect of the show. And how that's revealed throughout it. Yeah, in episode 5, I think we get a lot of this as well. And one of my favorite scenes of the show is when she's discussing with her mom and dad whether she should get the implant. And she like gets pieces of the conversation. And it's also just this discussion of like cultures and how the mom and dad's cultures differ. And there's this one part I picked up on in second viewing where the mom's like, I want to be able to talk to her, because I guess like only the dad learned sign language. And that explained a lot for me about the mom, honestly, and her relationship with Alma, is that she wasn't able to talk with her for like her half of her childhood. That like really clicked some things into place for me.
But I mean, that's a choice she made. Like, I think that's like you need to like acknowledge that she made the choice not to learn. Like, that's
and then she counters to Dad, "Why'd you never learn Spanish?" So this is I think it's a discussion the show is having.
But the thing is, like, I think and that's a discussion. But this is my problem with the situation is that this is a power. Like, there's a power dynamic here. It's not fair for Camilla to say that like there's not communication between her and her daughter when her daughter literally can't talk back and she's a child. Like, she's a child and this is her mom who has full reign of her lilife. And whether that's good or bad, and her mom didn't take the effort to talk to her.
Yeah, so she's not blaming Alma in this moment. She's saying like, I want her, this is why I'm pushing her to get the implant so much is so I can
But I think I'm not saying she's blaming her, but I think the conscious decision to not learn sign language is a bad one. Like, I'm saying, like, there's a difference between two adults, like between one of the adults not learning Spanish. Like, if you had a second language, Dylan, there's a difference between me not learning that language and me having a child and not learning the way to communicate with them. That's just like such a different decision, I think. Like, I think she's equivocating.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think it's fair. I think you're judging a lot without information.
I mean, I'm
like maybe she tried and she couldn't do it. Like maybe.
But I mean, like,
that's how we see, though. We can only judge based on what we see from the show, right? I mean,
my point here, Dylan, is that later in the show, she talks about how hard it is to communicate with her daughter, and she never acknowledges that part of that problem is with her. She always says it's either us
and that makes sense for the mom character, right? Like, this is a constant mom problem, I think.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like, this ties into it. She's not making the effort, and I'm going to say I'm biased and let this go.
Yeah, so we can talk about her. So you and Alex seem pretty anti mom, and I found her to be one of the more sympathetic characters on the show. While I think everyone was deeply flawed, I think she's fair. I found her to be vindicated by the end of the show, in which we learn how terrible the dad was. I don't think that
vindicates her, but I do think it just shows that right? The aspect that she tried really hard, and other aspects where she probably didn't try as hard as she should have.
Yeah, I think so. She's certainly deeply flawed. Explaining the ending of the show and how that influenced, though, so we learn what the dad was doing and how she took action to get Alma away from that situation. We learned that he was schizophrenic and how that must have affected her, and then we learned that that's why she's like pushing this so much on Alma, and like maybe she's like justified in like having Alma seek medication. I think like kind of her pursuit of mental health treatment for Alma makes a lot of sense at the end, and clearly she has like questionable actions throughout the show, but I do think the finale like takes large steps to humanize her even more.
I mean, it does humanize her. I don't know if I would say her pushing medication on her adult 28-year-old daughter is justified, but she's a mom, and I mean, I can relate to like moms thinking like, well, I'll never not be your mom, and I'll always like have this unspoken seniority over your life choices. I think it's really interesting that Sarah brought up that Camilla never learns sign language, because like I do think that's like a literal way to not be able to communicate with your kid who is deaf and can't just speak Spanish or English. Like, that's the one way they can talk. Like, that is a choice she made. But also the fact that she so painstakingly tried to preserve this positive memory of like her husband, who like was experimenting on his daughter legally, hooking up with some student, like murdered himself and this she didn't know that.
I think that's for Alma's benefit.
But like who was like schizophrenic, like I think it is, again, like there are a lot of things about Camilla I don't agree with, and I think actively hurt her relationship to the rest of her family. But there are other moments where she obviously tried very hard to make things easier for her kids, at least in terms of the things she wouldn't acknowledge happened because it felt like she was protecting them. And I do think like the feeling of like in the initial episodes of like, oh, she keeps like butting in and telling her what to do when she discovers like the schizophrenia and being really adamant about the pills, like it does feel like a huge violation. And it kind of is that she's like literally stealing like prescription notes out of her adult daughter's purse and buying the pills. But then again, like I think it gives a lot of clarity once you find out that the father also had schizophrenia and like in a way may have contributed to his suicide. So like it's very understandable why she'd be so concerned and be like more aggressively trying to stop that from happening with her child when she's seen the results of it with a different person.
Yeah, definitely.
But again, like I really think like while that does humanize her and it does make part of her actions really like better in air quotes, there are other things that just like kind of suck. But again, like that's what I like about like none of these characters are great characters, not even the sister, not even Becca, because Becca okay, the thing is like
we'll get to Becca. We'll get to Becca.
I mean, like,
we'll get to
I'll
Becca.
Just say, like on this sort of like no one being untouchable, like Becca cheats on her fiance and then she kind of tries to blame Alma for that. Alma definitely kind of like pushed it to be a thing, but she also like was picking up on body language that her sister was clearly into this bartender and gave her a nudge. Becca went for it of her own free will.
It's just
so
such a
like,
different dynamic though, because they're sisters, not mother and
okay,
child.
let's get to Becca in a second. Let's finish up Camilla here.
No one's
I have more to say about Camilla, but like,
let me. I'm gonna throw to you and Alex in a second, but yes to a lot of how the finale affects stuff that Michelle said. I first of all, I think like the dad's schizophrenia, if he did, like kill himself and his assistant,
like
I think that definitely was the reason why. But that's my perspective on things. Also, I think normally, obviously it's incredibly invasive if a mom is like filling a prescription for her adult daughter and like pushing her so much. I think it's justified if she has schizophrenia. Like, I think she needs to be, I like agree with her actions, honestly, in terms of like getting her treatment. Like, this is such a serious illness. So I like, and that's the show is like questioning, the effect of it. But I think like she represents the societal viewpoint of this mental illness. And like, I think like from that perspective, like you totally understand what she's doing, especially given the fact that, her husband, was taken away from her because of this. So I like, and okay, how about Sarah or Alex? What, in terms of some of the humanizing things of Camilla, what do you think of that?
I already talked a little. Alex, did you have something?
Okay, so
yeah,
Camilla is I think that you guys have talked about how you can justify her actions, which to me in a way almost makes it more insidious the way she's acting towards Alma. The fact that from the outside you can say like, oh, well, she's doing motherly things, but at a personal level, like someone pretending to come to your house, you're like, oh, let's have cookies and tea, and then like sneaking into your stuff, violating your privacy to do that is something that I have had to happen to me many times over, and so that is a very, very ugly thing that authority figures will do to exert their power over you. So like I do not I get that you can justify it with she's going through mental illness, but at the same time it just feels very disgusting for someone to act in that way. And later on, like we mentioned with the finale of her, we get this added perspective that the dad potentially also had this same thing that they believe Alma has, and well, I get that, but like there's just some weird thing with like how Camilla is portrayed throughout the series. It's very reminiscent of a mother who only wants the status quo, who wants to keep things as simple and easy as possible, and will mess with their children's lives in order to keep things as close as possible. So, like, even if it wasn't mental illness, if Alma was just having a different life, I get the sense that Camilla would act in exactly the same way, which to me, like, that's probably an assumption too far, perhaps on my part, but at the same time, like there's not enough here that says like this is specifically because of mental illness. Like to me, this feels like this is just how the mothering aspect that she has, and also the idea of keeping dad as vague as possible for her. That's also an exerting of power, like being like, okay, look, I'm the only parent here that you need to know about and pay attention to. That is the past. You don't need to worry about that. And so I will hide as much information as possible to make things as simple for me to be the mother figure in this family. So just there's a lot of stuff in this show that while I get that, like from the outside, like you can say, okay, well this is a mother doing motherly things and trying to protect their daughter, but to me it definitely gives off a very, very bad taste in my mouth, a lot of the actions that she takes. And so that's part of why the ending doesn't feel uplifting to me, because it just feels like Alma's going back to this very toxic family relationship, and one that hasn't really changed that much from where it started.
That's really
Alex,
interesting about
question. Do you think her relationship with Becca by the end of the show is toxic?
Let's get to Becca in a second.
Yeah. That's a tough question because I have an opinion on that too, based on what.
Yeah.
Okay, I love what Alex had to say about kind of the invasiveness of Camilla in Alma's life, and I think that was a valid question. Like, would Camilla be doing similar things even if she wasn't severely mentally? I think that was a great question, a great point. And I agree with you. Like, that time when she shows up to the house, like, she is super invasive in unnecessary ways, and like when I'm saying like she should be like in mental like health treatment wise, she should be like pushing her to take pills and to go to therapy. Like, normally no, but when it's this severe of an illness, yes. Like, I think like that doesn't include all these other things that she's doing too, right? Like, and so here's something else that stood out to me was, like she wants to get, young Alma to get the implant to, communicate with her, understandable, but she also wants her to go to the normal school and not go to deaf school. So she's trying to like, make her lead a more traditional life, and it's not just for her like benefit as like in family communication or to Alma's benefit. It's also she just wants like a normal child, and I think like that's kind of destructive too. Yeah,
but
there's also a scene related to this where she talks to the priest, right? And it's like the priest will be like, okay, I'll support you on this. I'll help you get her to take medicine. But as soon as the priest like figures out like, okay, I need to respect this person's boundaries, Mom is like, oh, okay, you're against me. And like, it's just the quickness with which she like, as soon as someone doesn't support her point of view, she's like, okay, you're of no use to me.
And that's
like
another point of view that I'm used to as well.
Yeah.
That's a great point about that scene with the priest. Also, even perfect Tyler Posey priest is a kind of a flawed character in that, like, once
oh my god, he was like a character for 2 episodes.
I know, but like even with him being in 2 episodes, like after the he's like, okay, don't push. He's like, and Camilla's like, oh, she's hearing voices, and Tyler Posey's like, in a way, aren't I hearing voices from God too? And it's like he's just completely terrible about mental illness. Like, no, it's not deep. It's terrible. Like what he's saying.
I mean, he's a terrible priest at least. Like,
I think he's a good priest in terms of trying to build in a diverse perspective to his teachings, and but even if you could say it's fake, but I think that was like kind of the implication. But yeah, like even the super side characters get like these deeply flawed perspectives.
Sorry, I keep crying out. I just really want to say one more thing about Camilla. I'm sorry. Because everything Alex said was true. And I just want to, again, say before I get into this that, like, I am heavily biased because I've had a ton of conversations that match these conversations very, very scarily closely with my own mother. And so it becomes so here's the thing. Because we're seeing a situation here with Camilla where she's right. She is right about this. That's
frustrating, right?
It's frustrating. And that's frustrating because she's right. Like, she's doing this, and Alma does need help. She does need it. But the thing is, as viewers, we're not seeing every single time Camilla did this when she wasn't. Because I can promise you, she was doing this even when she wasn't right. Every single day. And that from someone who isn't used to a mother like this, like, this is Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, like, that was my assumption. I'm assuming you assume that as well. Like, she did this all the time, even when she wasn't right. Because, like, that's what they do. That's what she does. Like, that's just her personality. She needs to do this all the time. She needs to make sure she's in control, even when she isn't right. And she's definitely doing this. She's definitely making sure that her daughter believes certain things so that the conversations we have are in specific ways. Because the thing that really stuck out to me is when Camilla really wants her daughters to be at the church, not for them, but for her. She wants her daughters there to see her be honored for being such a good member of the church. And that is, she wants something from her kids without any strings attached. She wants them to come and for them to not ask her for anything in return. She wants them there. She wants them to respect her. And then as soon as that's over, like, she wants that done because she is the mom and she's done so much work. And that's the only reason she wants it. Like, she wants to be seen as the mother who's great and her kids are there at church with her, being respected. And I could go on for a long time and I won't because I can rant. But this is just, I find it very hard to believe she doesn't do this also when she's clearly in the wrong as well.
Yeah, that last thing you said made a lot of sense. She's like, she's not doing it. She's doing it for like her image, which
yeah.
Is, yeah.
But
I think in a vacuum, I think it's like fine, like for her to want her daughters there for a big moment. You know, like, but your point about like, it's like even if you like can agree, and I don't think like me saying like it's justified for her pushing mental health on their daughter. I don't think like that's not up for debate or anything. That's just my perspective on it. But even if you accept that, she's still doing all these other things, and that's a great point about so many other things off screen too. So yeah, and by the way, I think your guys' perspective on Camilla is like totally the show's intent. Like, I think like this is absolutely like what this character is supposed to be.
It's just
everything
hard.
we discussed. It's like, yeah, like, I mean, this type of show. It's like hard, but like, you know, like this is, it's not necessarily supposed to be purely enjoyable. You're supposed to be like flawed, nuanced characters.
And I'd like to echo something that Sarah said in terms of it's frustrating that the show, if we read this as this is actually mental illness, then it's frustrating that that episode 8 is like, oh, she was right the whole time, and maybe her actions were even more justified than you expected.
And that'll make her.
And yeah, and like if I mean, you're valid if you want to make the assumption that she hasn't been like this her whole life. That's fine. But like, if you're coming at it from our perspective, it's like, oh, this is terrible.
She's gonna use this for years. She will use this situation where she was right and her daughter was wrong and clearly thinking wrong, and hold it over her daughter for years and use this as reason to get into her life when she isn't right. And this will be like, the mom will use this as leverage forever, and it's not good. Like, that's the way I saw it, Alex. Like, this is something where the mom is going to have even more control over Alma.
Yeah.
And it's
I think that's valid what you guys are saying for sure. I think like the show wouldn't care. It's not interested in like justified, at least from its perspective. I feel like it's like, yeah, the mom she cares about her daughters, you know. I
think the show is aware of this. I really think the show is aware of it.
I think I mean, you guys can disagree. I feel like it's aware of everything we talked about. Which is like really,
I think it is.
Really
it's just whether you understand like the implications of this because you were through it or not. Like there's implications here that like go deeper for some people. Like,
yeah, and I love you guys talking about those. Yeah.
Question tangentially related to Camilla.
Yes.
Couldn't another reason she wants her daughters to come to church with her for the candle thing, but also like in general go to church, is because like everyone we've seen at the church, except for maybe the priest, if I'm not mistaken, were non-white people, and like could there be like a cultural aspect of wanting to? Because like I feel like especially with Becca marrying this like Southern white guy, and like her fiance's mom is like clearly very racist and says the wedding's like unconventional and all these like terribly obviously bad things. Like I think there's a fear that like her kids are just like moving away from her culture,
and that's another control of power there.
Yeah.
Like, I need to keep these people in the same sphere that I've always kept them. This is the routine. This is what we always do together, and this is the pattern that we need to keep.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, I can understand like a certain amount of like sadness or just like, I don't know, just like a feeling of loss that like you hold on to a culture so strongly and then your kids just like move away from it entirely.
And that's valid. Her feelings are valid.
Right, like it's valid.
But she acts on them in a really bad way.
It does not absolve her. But I feel like that's another layer of this too.
And I think that's what Alex and I are saying. I don't think we're saying Camilla's malicious. I don't think you're saying that, Alex. I think we're just saying like the way she acts on these feelings is horrible and problematic and really bad for Alma. I think there's an argument there of whether she's doing it consciously or not. Like sometimes she's.
Well, I wouldn't say she's doing it consciously.
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of the culture, the way that many parents are brought up. Like they have had their own parents who act like this, and it's like, okay, well, this is how I was raised. This is how I raised my children, and it's just a very vicious cycle that continues to manifest itself in families across the world.
Yeah, we can talk about
this.
It's
a good ending. Okay, yeah. Okay, let's move on to we can more quickly go through some other characters. Becca, who was mentioned. This is one of my other favorite aspects of the show is Becca and Alma's relationship. They have 2 scenes towards the end of the show. One in I think episode 7 when they're on the stairs. And then the last scene of the show in episode 8, I think those are just gorgeous scenes. What stands out to me about Becca is that she's like, there's great sister relationship. What stands out to me about Becca is she's like the more like societally, like conventional one. Like she's the one that's trying to embrace societal conventions, like to a large extent and trying to do what's like expected in life and stuff. But like even through all of that, like she's by far the most understanding one of what Alma's going through when she's talking to her. And like, I'm like, wow, I was like really impressed with the way she talks to her in episode 8. Like, even though she like probably has the societally conventional perspective of thinking that she's mentally ill, she's like trying to like, give her space to and validate like what she thinks is happening in that moment. She's very like soft with Alma in these times, and it seems very understanding. That being said, maybe she's also nudging her towards the societal convention as well. She's like, okay, let's go home, let's get treatment at the end of the show. And so I think it's like really interesting how she's handling it. At the very least, she does seem, at least on the surface, to be one of the most understanding characters to Alma. Sam, what do you think of Becca?
I like her. You know, she's just one of those girls who comes into your life and you're like, oh, she's nice, but I don't think I want to like spend more than an hour with her.
Becca's not your type of person.
Not my type of person. Like, I mean, she's a nice person, but like we wouldn't be friends. Yeah. That's how I measure if I like somebody, like a character, if I think we would be friends or not. But you know, I think that, you know, while she was not a central character, I think central characters, Alma, Jacob, maybe Sam, etc. in there. But Becca was kind of like on the side, like, oh, I'm getting married, and all my wedding shit is just like what's happening in reality. So that's that plot. So she wasn't taking up the limelight, but I liked her a fair amount. I liked just having that anchor and normalcy. Like, it was a great foil to what was happening with all the surrealist time is an illusion sort of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And while, you know, by itself, maybe it would have been more dull and kind of, I don't really want to watch this kind of shit, I still liked it. You know, it's the same sort of tropes that we're seeing in a lot of shows nowadays. Like, Fleabag has this sort of thing with the sister relationship. Vita has, like, a sister relationship that's like that, where, you know, there is, like, some tension and conflict between the two, but, you know, obviously they're people who love each other and people who bounce off each other really well, and I like that sort of thing. You know, I like Becca when she's with Alma. I like that sort of thing. I don't think we've seen her outside of the context of Alma, though.
Nice. Yeah, you're right. It's like her wedding stuff's very conventional, but it's a great foil to the zaniness that's going on with Alma. It's a great point. Michelle, what are your feelings on Becca?
I like Becca.
Yay.
I mean, I don't know. I was just thinking that it's really interesting that, like, clearly their father's death really impacted the way they both think about relationships and into like very polar opposite ways of handling that concept, because you got Alma on one side who's like, I'm terrified of commitment. It's all going to go wrong. I'm not the kind of person who can do this. And then you have Becca who wants the stability of what that promise is supposed to be so badly of marriage that she's willing to marry a guy who's like kind of whatever. And she like honestly doesn't ever seem that super into, like, she's willing to do that just like for stability. So I feel like the fact that they're both like, they get each other on that level, that they're both grappling with the outcome of the same thing, but to various extents, is really, I don't know. That's again like one of those like very relatable parts of the show. And I will say, like, I do think Becca is one of the kindest people to Alma. They have their own situation, but I feel like, I mean, Becca has that whole talk about how she's like, oh, because like Alma's like, oh, like you were always the perfect one. You always got like good grades. You went to college. Like you did everything right. You're getting married. And Becca was like, excuse you? Like, you were the one who always had the most attention because, like, you were the wild child. Well, she was terrible in that
moment because she was like, well, you had your stuff going on with your hearing stuff. And she's like, Alma's like, that wasn't my fault, you know, like, so.
But it's like, I wouldn't say she's awful. It's just like, that's how siblings can be sometimes. And you spend years, like, having all these feelings and being kind of jealous and, like, and selfish, frankly, about how your sibling makes you feel and not necessarily what they're doing and how it's affecting them. And it comes out like that. So again, it's just very relatable, but you can tell that they both still really care about each other. And the fact that Becca's the one to go out and find her in the desert at the end, I feel like is such a good way to say, like, again, I feel like at the beginning of the show, Alma is at this crossroads with so many people in her life. And by the end of it, the one thing that's clear to me is that she has gotten closer to Becca in a significantly stronger way. And I feel like Becca is trying to understand this unfolding part of what, like, her older sister having schizophrenia means, but she's willing to tackle that with her. And it really could have not gone that way. And I'm really glad that, like, this is the outcome we got. Because, like, that's the thing with any relationship, right? Like, there are things that lead to things either like drawing you closer and more understanding with somebody or pushing you farther away. And it's a very tumultuous game of life kind of thing. So like, again, like we don't know if she reset realities or anything for real, but like at the end of the day, like her relationship with Becca like is legitimately getting closer than it might have been for a decade or decades, plural. Yeah. And I feel like that's like what makes the ending feel uplifting to me. Like, I don't know how she feels about the mom. I don't know if she can resolve everything with Sam. I feel like at least they seem like okay, but like her and Becca are going to be in this journey together for as long as it lasts. And like, that's so beautiful to me. I love that.
Yeah. I also thought that was really uplifting with the ending. Yeah, I agree. Sarah, you said you had Becca thoughts.
Yeah. And I'm going to keep them short because but Becca is, I like Becca. I think Becca's faults are a lot more easy to accept than her mom's because we don't see Becca's perspective a lot. And I think the important thing to remember is that her mom is also Camilla. And I won't talk about Camilla a lot, Dylan, don't worry. I'm just saying that under the assumption that I have that Alma was emotionally abused by her mom for a lot longer than we see, so is Becca. And even if Becca is agreeing with her mom and doing things like that's a form of abuse, she's been conditioned to do these things because her mom approves of them. And so if you notice when Becca's in scenes with Alma and the mom, Becca acts noticeably different, like noticeably more like similar to the mom. But when they're alone in the desert and like that whole veneer of their parents' opinions of them goes away, they're so much closer to each other. They don't care about that. And I think it really shows just, even though we don't see it, their parents have affected them so much. And it really shows that, like, when you strip that away, they grew up together. They're still sisters. But when they're in front of their mom, they feel so much like they need to perform or do specific things. And it's really tragic. And you wish that they could be closer to each other when they're not just alone out in this desert. And it really fits.
That's a great point about how they interact differently without the mom around. I love that. And I think Becca with like flaws wise is like okay, in the first episode, you know, she sleeps with the bartender, but Alma also instigated the situation. It's still Becca's fault, but like she's scared. And then at the end, and then in episode 7, the twist of like, oh, and I slept with someone else too. It's like, oh wow, like I thought she was actually the one good person. No, she's also terrible. Okay, I thought that was like that's a really affecting reveal too. Episode 7 that she cheats again. Alex, how about we move to Alma and any aspects of Alma we haven't like discussed because we talked about her through other characters. You know, as a big Alma fan, and anything else stands out to you about her?
Well, just one thing I want to say on Becca is just that the ending with Becca seems very similar to how Sam treats Alma as well, where it's like playing along as long as like Alma's comfortable, and then finding a place where like, oh, hey, by the way, here's the thing that I actually came here for, which was for the
yeah, pills. I read it.
So like
that's fair.
Yeah, so
I think
there's
she's
another
I feel,
interpretation that isn't as
yeah,
uplifting.
it's another interpretation. I think it's also valid that she like is genuinely concerned and trying to give her space. Also, I
Sure,
think Sam,
sure.
we'll talk about Sam in a second. I think Sam is a turning point. I think he was buying in, and then something changes. But yeah, how about Alma?
Alma specifically, I mean, I think Sam said that like she speaks her mind a lot, and like that is it makes for very fun moments where like she like the way she like talks with kids is very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I usually don't like kid scenes in adult shows, but like somehow like she makes them pretty fun when she's like doing this whole thing like in the cave, like she's like making these like stories where she's like or she's saying hi to them, like it feels very natural. So like her relationship to children is very interesting. Her chemistry with Sam when they're in alone, and the like just like is it the first episode that she's doing like the humping from behind?
It is.
That's a pretty good like cozy couples move. So like I don't know. So it just Alma has a lot of personality to her, and at the same time, like when we get into these fantasy moments with her dad, like she kind of picks up everything fairly quickly, but at the same time, like not super quickly enough that it feels rushed, but like it feels natural in the way that she's getting everything. So I don't know if there's like something specific about Alma that I like, but it's just all around, like her character is always interesting in terms of how she reacts to different situations and how she responds back to different characters. So she does a lot of things right in terms of entertainment purposes, and as a character, she's struggling with this totally new dynamic that I'm sure anybody, if they were introduced to that, would be driven mad. So there's a lot of new stuff that she needs to deal with, and I think she handles it as admirably as anybody could.
Yeah, I agree with all that. She's like just such a rich character with such rich relationships with everyone around her. It's like astounding that this characterization can happen in 8 episodes. In general, we were talking about this, and like I think Alex had the observation, like these are like the longest, or someone did the longest 22-minute episodes ever. And like I also thought, when I was watching, I also thought like, oh my god, this is still one episode. I thought this was like a double-sized episode, and that can be a bad thing if it's like so like it's like trudging along. But I thought this like, wow, we're fitting so much in, and I wasn't checking the clock. I was like engrossed, and it's like, oh my god, it's only been 22 minutes. That's crazy.
The only time I ever checked the clock was when I was like, man, it feels like midnight. I look at my phone, it's only like 8 o'clock, and I'm only like,
right.
Like that's the only time I ever felt the need to check the time in the episodes, because I thought there was like some like actual magic happening in that, like how did they fit these episodes?
You were watching non-linearly. Yeah,
I know. It feels like the episodes are so long, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Exactly like you. Like it doesn't feel like it's possible these episodes are only 22 minutes. They're so dense.
This is a complicated show, but there's a few aspects when this is just like an all-time great show. Like there's not like overall. I mean, overall, you could make the argument. I think there's an argument this is the best animated show of the year. I think it's up there for me. But like, like just certain ways it's doing things are like so different and unique and incredible. I don't know. Like this is one. This isn't like a specific thing it's doing, but just that stands out to me in like how dense these episodes are. Back to Alma. Alma's hilarious. Yes. Alex talked about this. I want to talk about my favorite jokes of the season.
Yes.
My favorite joke was in episode 3 with the lesbian mom, construction worker.
That was good.
That was my big laugh out loud, but that's the only gay in the show is the lesbian mom.
Unfortunate.
But that's also like endearing that they're like teaching the kids about different types of people through the lesbian mom figure. I think the other big one is episode 6. There's a lot of great humor here. I think Alex loved Daryl.
I did
the Daryl bit.
Sarah loved Daryl.
I think it's one of my favorite gags of the entire year, because it's like a 4-episode payoff for like one of the stupidest jokes. Like I didn't like
joke.
That's a stupid joke, and it takes 4 episodes to pay off. But like the absurdity of how long it takes to get there, and like it's not even like that good a joke. It's just the absurdity of it. Like I just can't believe like.
Okay, I like that aspect. I was like, what did you see in it? Okay, I agree with that part, the framing of it, I guess. Yeah. The other part of episode 6 I love is just Sam and Alma are like hilarious together. I also think Sam is so funny. I think his actor is just very funny. But in episode 6 is like, it was always the push. It's weird that you would say that. Babe, I would never kill you. Like that exchange was amazing to me.
I know that. Okay.
We can get Sam's thoughts on Sam in a second.
Oh my god.
Sam on Sam.
Sam on Sam.
I just want to say in that episode when Alma is like, doing this whole deep thing on the security guards, like I know that you lost a family member, and like it's like diving into her memories, and then like after like a brief silence, Sam is just like, you got all that from her screensaver, and like that for some reason killed me. I think it was the timing of like we went through such like an emotional scene, and then Sam is just like, wait, did you just look at the computer? It's like
I also just love the framing of that joke, because I saw the screensaver and I was thinking that too. So like the visual framing, I feel like was great of that. Okay. We can hit on any other comedic moments as we go along here, but closing it out on Alma, I think Rosa Salazar gives incredible performance, and like this is like hard to judge versus other animation performances because she's giving a live action performance. Like that's the thing, these are like all live action performances that are painted over, but like I'm so in love with this performance. Like this is I don't know, just the range of expression she gives. There's one moment when she's with Bob Odenkirk and it's like some non-thing, and she's just like smiling really big or like laughing joking with him, teasing him about something that he's explaining to her or something. They like repeat it too in another fashion, in another scene. They repeat a lot of stuff. That reminds me, brief thought. So non-linear things that I picked up on rewatch, I forgot to say this, is that there's scenes of the dad coming out of the cave sprinkled throughout the show, which you don't realize at first or what it is. The show does highlight it by repeating them, but I still didn't realize on first viewing that they were from earlier in the season. But there are shots in like episode 2 and 5 or something of like someone coming out of the cave or the dad walking out of the cave. So it's like, oh, was this non-linearly actually happening? And I thought like it's really like the non-linearness I think is there, but it's still a story that goes in order. But also there's non-linear stuff happening that's like even hard to pick up on. So that's like a really interesting rewatch part of the show too. Is like what's from later, what's from before. There's a bunch of stuff thrown in there. Quickly, we can talk about Sam. I gave some of the Sam positive perspective. Sam, what do you not like about Sam?
He's so fucking annoying. Jesus Christ.
So it's not even the one horrible morally action he takes. Well, it's just like he's annoying. Too.
He's a fucking asshole, and I don't. No, get out of her life. Fuck you. But, okay, so I feel like couples are written in a couple different ways, just throughout media. There's like, oh, we're so in love, and it's so dramatic sort of way. And it's like, oh, we're buddies, and we joke around, ha 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 sort of way, which this obviously falls into relationship-wise. I don't give a shit about that at all. I don't care. I don't want... Like if there was any downside of the show for me, it was like having to deal with Alma and Sam's relationship. Like he's just the boyfriend who is in the show who I have to deal with. And, episode 5 kind of remedies that with, going into his backstory, and I respect that. And, he's a person, and he's had his hardships throughout his life. And, I'm not saying that he's a bad person in that regard, but it's just, I don't want that from the show, and him just constantly cracking jokes is really annoying, and it's like a good little comic relief, haha, from all the serious shit that's happening. But we already got Alma cracking jokes. Them two together cracking jokes just like takes me out of it. I just could not do episode 6.
Okay. I guess that's fair. It's kind of interesting. You could see Sam having his own, like Master of None type of sitcom as the lead character, but he's like the supporting character in this. That's pretty interesting.
That's exactly what I thought.
He's that's like what I was thinking. Speckle, but he's not nearly as good as Speckle.
Yes, agreed.
Yes. Okay, so I agree. He's like the Speckle. I think he is a pretty strong character. I'll give my case for Sam. Like the hang up with Sam is he takes this one terrible action that is like maybe the worst thing any character does in the show, which is like pretend. playing into Alma not remembering that she broke up with him. And it's just like hard to get past this like horrible thing he's doing. And I kind of end up getting it in that he's just like a character of inaction and going, like he explains it as just going with the flow. And like, that's not an excuse, but it's like almost like I guess I get what he's like how he arrived at this point, because that's just how he goes through life.
Motherfucker, he moved all of his stuff out and he moved it back in.
And he pretended he didn't, and she thought she was so bad.
It's so insidious. That like I was so out on him. Like, and then episode 5 comes and they address it, and then like he gets these humanizing flashbacks, and they present them as like such a cute couple, and then they go through episode 6 being said, and it's like I guess that's a very nuanced portrayal, because we got like terribly negative and then also very positive. I don't know what to think of Sam overall, I guess because of that negative action, but like I do think he's very funny. I can see what you're saying about maybe taking it out of some things because he's like a different type of character. I think his actor is very funny throughout the show.
I mean, he's charismatic, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
but again, if I met him in real life, we would not be friends.
I think I will say it's really telling that in the first episode, she literally tells him, like, I don't ever want to be like my sister. I don't want to settle down. I don't want to get married. I don't want to have a family. That's how I genuinely feel. And he's like, yeah, sure, okay. You feel that way now. Like, even then, he doesn't seem to quite take that seriously. He assumes she's going to change her mind. And I feel like that plays into all the sketchier stuff that happens later already before we've even gotten into schizophrenia territory. He's exhibiting the signs of not really listening to her when she's being serious and assuming that what he thinks is best for both of them is what they should do.
He just assumes they're going to get there because that's what all couples do. He's like Becca. He's like the kind of like societal, typical one. And Alma's like, I'm not doing that. And he just is like, that's, and I think it's valid if he's like, for now, sure, I don't care. We can just be together. But yeah, I mean, certainly he's not like a great boyfriend, even without the terrible action he takes.
I think here's the thing with the problem with Sam is that he does a lot of actions. I'm sorry to bring this back, because I think this does tie the show together. I think it's really important. I think he does a lot of things that are like Camilla. To Alma, I'm sorry. He does, though, because it's on purpose. She goes to him and he gaslights her. Literally gaslights her.
He
saying, like,
does.
I'm your boyfriend.
His thing with the moving out is certainly gaslighting.
Yes, but I'm saying, like, it's and when he tries to get her, he's like, I called your mom. Like he knows the buttons to push for her, is what I'm saying. Like, he knows the ways to get at her, to dig at her deeply, and I'm not saying he does it maliciously. Again, I'm just saying he does a lot of things that are similar to the way that she was treated as a kid, and that's like...
It just plays in the bad things.
It plays into the bad things.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. They're both adults, which is a completely different dynamic. And the thing is, she understands why he made these choices. She understands why he would do this to her, but also knows that he had no obligation to anything at all. And that's the difference here. Like, there's not a power dynamic here.
Yeah, it's a different power dynamic.
And I think that means that if she forgives him, I'm willing to forgive Sam. If she's willing to look past it, like, if she sees this and she understands why her boyfriend did this and says, okay, that's completely different than her going along with what her mom says or what someone else does, because this is just an equal dynamic from her perspective, and that's what's important, her perspective here. And that's a great point
about the power dynamics.
I'll agree with that, but I will say, like, if she has schizophrenia and he doesn't, that is not
that's
entirely
also a power dynamic,
equal.
Yeah.
I agree with what you said, Sarah, but like the reality is like if she has a mental illness that is that serious, he's going to be able to make judgment calls on her well-being that she potentially can't stop and might not agree with. Honestly, and she's a little helpless there.
Honestly, I think the worst action taken by Sam is when, like, surprisingly, like the worst action in terms of like them being equal partners is when he is called by her boss and he makes a decision for her about her job. Like, I think that's just, it's a line. It feels like a weirder line than when he lies to her, just because like of the conversation they have about it. Like, this is different in that he never apologizes for it. He never says this was wrong. He thinks he was in the right doing it. And I think
I thought he was just like, I don't think he really said much in that call. What do you say? Like, I feel like he was just like, I don't think
he did either, but he agreed with the boss. He said, like, yeah, I'm going to work. Like, I just want to point out that, like, it happened.
I guess he should have handled that differently. He does tell her right after.
He should have, yeah.
It's the boss that was the most at fault, I think.
But I mean, like, yeah, no,
the
I
boss
agree,
I don't know. I mean,
I will say the boss is maybe the one non-flawed character
I
of the
agree.
show. Like,
But
he's
the
pretty
non-problematic way to deal with this, Dylan, is for the boyfriend to say, "Hey, she can make her own decisions."
Yeah, let me put you or her on the line or something. Or
yeah,
if
Cade's,
I don't think he answers it like super morally negative, but he's just oblivious, I guess.
Yeah,
in, like what he should be
Cade's
doing.
boss called me and told me that Cade did something, I would be like, let me talk to Cade about it first before
that's fair. That's fair.
Like that just seems like he, as the equal partner, he'd be like, hey, I'm around her more. Let me deal with this. You're telling me how to feel about my own partner. Like, this isn't right.
It's a fair interpretation. Yeah, and in terms of the schizophrenia thing, I think he certainly doesn't like think that until a certain moment, and that's why I think it's important with Sam to realize that, or to say that this is my perspective. He has a turning point, like in episode 7 or 8 or so. He at one point is like, okay, you're not. I guess I think she's not well now, unless he was hiding it the whole time, which is possible, and he was being malicious. But I think he's like, the reason he buys into her and is going along with her in episode 5 and in episode 6 is because I think he's being supportive. And like at some point he does call the mom, and like I think it's just out of concern for her well-being, and it's so I think like I think he's doing stuff for his well-being. It was really interesting about like Alma's perspective on forgiving him, which is like, it's like, how would you ever forgive someone for this? But I also bought it. Like this is like a stable person she has that she's like is really good with and loves, and it's like if she can like kind of at least understand why he was doing this and that he wasn't maybe fully being intentionally malicious, was just kind of like being more oblivious and opportunistic and like malicious, like not.
Quite an
consciously.
opportunity. That's quite an opportunity he took, though. Like
Right.
Sarah was
obviously,
saying,
I think it's terrible.
He capitalized on the fact that she had schizophrenia.
He moves back.
Literally, what
he capitalized on her injury. That's it.
On her injury, on her injury.
He capitalized on the fact that she didn't remember.
Right.
Moved all his
but from her perspective, she's like
and
trying
then
to rationalize
with
what
her. I feel like that's something.
And they talk about that too.
Show. We need to talk about that. Like,
I forgot about that.
If Alma did not forgive him, that would have been rape, and that is a huge problem.
Yeah,
it's a huge problem.
I honestly forgot this.
I could not forget that. That's like pretty serious.
No. Yeah, Michelle, you're 100% right. Like, I've been kind of glossing over.
I was glad the show at least talked about that for a second.
I understand that, like, for Alma to forgive him based on like here's past, and she knows he wasn't doing it to be cruel, but he did still do it, and I'm sure a part of him was being a little selfish there. She had just broken up with him. He likes her so much.
Sure.
He wants like to spend the rest of his life with her. And that, I mean, if Alma didn't forgive him, she would have been super justified. And yeah, it legit would have been rape, but that's really fucked up.
Michelle,
there's no way around.
It's certainly selfish. I think the question is more of just like consciously malicious versus subconsciously malicious. I think
Dylan, at a point, like, would it matter?
I'm not trying to comment. Like, I think he's terrible. I'm trying to like understand why.
Yeah, Michelle, I think
and I think that's what I'm thinking.
I think I should explain too. Like, I'm not saying I forgive Sam, because I think he should be like in jail for doing that stuff. But what I'm saying is that in this scene, Alma is the equal partner to Sam, and she is in her right to say this to him.
And I think it's understandable why she arrives at that conclusion.
If anyone had a right to forgive him, it's her, because it is decisions he made about her.
I think she's
wrong. I mean, I don't think she's wrong.
I think she was right for her current state. Like, I think it was good for her.
Is allowed to make any decision she wants because she's an adult. But again, if she didn't forgive him, this would look so terrible. And I just like need to get that out there, because
you could argue it's still. You could argue it's the same, even if she forgives him, or not the same thing happened before. But
I feel like because it's about her, she is allowed to determine if this is a good or bad situation, because like if she can't do that, she's not in control of her life.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't think she's like saying like it was good what he did, even though she wants to be with him after. I think it's more just like she arrives at a point where she forgives him.
It's not a deal breaker for her own reasons, and therefore like it's not going to ruin everything. But that's like her decision to make.
I think there is also an argument for the thing where he says like the sex thing is kind of where it goes over the line, but everything else where he's like, I was trying to keep you stable because you thought we were in a relationship still, and you were like mentally ill.
I mean, yeah, it's maybe kind of valid what he said, but also just tell her, like, just say it.
I know. I think there's an argument for like if he did it differently, like if the family was there all the time and they like stayed with him, like they were in on it, and, like they said, hey, let's keep you here, just like keep her stable, like
it would be like it'd still be like gaslighting, but it'd be like well-intentioned gaslighting. I guess.
Well-intentioned gaslighting, still gaslighting.
No, it is. I'm just saying, like, if it
is that even a thing?
It would just be a motivation. motivation, because clearly from his perspective, it feels like the full motivation is he wants.
The point, he was selfish. Like that's the thing you're saying. Like, he had a selfish reason
that's
for
the
doing
thing.
it.
Like,
I
Sam can be like, I don't think he has to be a garbage person to be selfish and have done this really objectively thing that makes me recoil.
Well,
because if Alma's going to forgive him, like, it's her life and she knows him better than we do, and she saw a lot of stuff in that flashback. So, all right, but again, it's like. You can still be very selfish and terrible, and I think Sam still kind of is.
But I think that's also important because we haven't talked about like how her dad is in this scene too, and a lot of scenes where she's dealing with Sam. Like, there's this confliction between like
at the end of episode 5, the whole thing is like, is she choosing to stabilize, anchor to Sam, or go fully into with her dad?
And again,
into what
there's
she's
a
going
power
through.
dynamic there. She's choosing the person without the power dynamic. Like, she's choosing the person she's equal to. Like, in this thing, like, she chooses to have this episode without any like really talking to her dad as much. Like, we see this as just her and Sam, and I think that's important that she makes this decision to be with the person more that has an equal footing with her. Like, that's a decision she makes, and I think that's one of the like. It's still fucked up. There's a lot of fucked up things in this, Michelle. But
no, I get what you're saying, and I think like I would agree, but also I would say like in a big way, I feel like her dad is like literally the metaphorical manifestation of the bad parts of her illness.
Yeah.
Because he gives her that blackjack game to disassociate from her actual problems in reality, to focus on a crazy fake mission to find out like how he died. So like I feel like it's a struggle not only between, say, maybe power dynamics, but also literally between like reality and just being in her own headspace, and that's like a bad negative thing. And Sam represents being attached to reality and dealing with her
that's
actual
what episode
life.
5's about. Yeah, and I agree. That's like this whole question towards the end, episode 5, I also really love that episode. We can quickly hit on the dad. For me, I don't have a lot of comments on the dad because I interpret him to be not real throughout large amounts of the show. So like, I don't think there's like
he's a reflection of Alma most of the time.
To characterize. It's more of just like an Alma characterization. He is in flashbacks in reality, so I think that's like that can be talked about. I mean, I think he was at times a strong part of the show. Anyone have specific Jacob comments?
I think it's important to note that, like, in the flashbacks, everything we see of him it's important to note that, like, everything we see in the schizophrenia is based on one flashback. Like, everything stems from it. Like, her way she treats him, the way he acts.
She starts to have more flashbacks throughout, or she starts to remember more things, and then that induces kind of different things.
Yeah, and at first it seems like it's like a visual thing, but it's like really like the way he acts, the way he like does things, and it makes it more kind of feel like it is mental illness, in that like the more she remembers, the more his personality changes in her envisioning of him.
Here's I was talking about like signs of the dad being not real. Here's some more ones I wrote down of things I picked up on. This like gorgeous dream world they're in, that's the screen cap for this podcast, is Sam's painting that he gives her in the hospital. It's just that she's just imagining the painting, or at least they look similar. That's my interpretation. There's several flashbacks of him teaching her sign language throughout, and I think that manifests as him teaching her to move the keys in episode 4. It's kind of based off of these memories. And then her memory of her dad. She's a memory where the dad is playing blackjack, I think, the blackjack game when fighting with the mother, and only after that does she start. Does the dad tell her to get the game, and so like that's what I'm saying. Like it's things that are happening with her dad are increasingly, at least they're connected, and that to flashbacks that are happening, and the show invites you to at least an interpretation that these are being based on her memories. Yeah, not too much more time to get into Jacob, I guess. But,
one hot take on Jacob.
Yeah.
I can't believe Alma's dad is literally Saul Goodman. I just can't get over that! It's him!
Bob Odenkirk's in other things.
Aaron,
But I
mean,
Michelle just watched Breaking Bad. Like, give it.
Like, Saul is fresh in my blood. And
Yeah, it's-
you're gonna watch Better Call Saul now?
Yeah, it's fine. It's not as good though.
No, but I'm just saying, like, I get where Michelle's coming from.
Yes!
But like, really like Breaking Bad. Like, she was just talking to me about it, and it was in my mind too.
I can't believe Alma's dad is the sort of bad guy from Incredibles 2.
Wait, he was in Incredibles too? Oh my
Yeah,
god.
he was that sort of bad guy.
Gets around.
He was the guy.
Can we talk about like a couple of the funny moments with him? Because I had a couple that I really loved.
Yes.
Like, I really loved the scene with like the stick shift because like I've had essentially that conversation with my own dad too. Like that scene is so
Old people
fun.
are so annoying with stick shift.
Yeah.
That was a real moment. Yeah. Okay, what else?
Oh man, he's just like, I think like the entire conversation about the keys and whether they're moving or not, like try and don't try, and like just like every time she's just like every conversation he has with her, it's like he seems to just like not actually know what he's talking about, and it's all really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
I will just briefly say related to the dad. There's that one video that Sam is watching of Jacob doing this kind of indigenous ritual in his room, and then mom walks in, and Sam is visibly perturbed by this. And I will say that in general, I didn't look at the credits, so like I don't know how much Latinette's writing staff was in this, but I do have to say that the idea of the white guy using indigenous culture as like as fodder for his breakthrough discoveries and immersing himself in it feels a little just a bit off. I don't think that they use it enough for me to be like that's a deal breaker, but it definitely feels strange that if you want to do the interpretation that this is actually a real power and that this is something that the guy actually discovered, but it still feels weird the way he goes about connecting it to other cultures is like this is the explanation for them that is like this big scientific thing that I discovered sort of thing.
I think you can interpret that as intentional by the show in playing into him being a bad person, like Jacob being a bad person. He's also culturally appropriating them with his research, so I think that could be intentional. But at the very least, the show the thing is the show presents Jacob's ideas as like a big. It gives it a big microphone. Like it's clearly and largely portrayed, and so that's why it's like even if the show isn't really saying. Like schizophrenia is like a gateway to higher existence. Like at least Jacob is loudly saying that in the show. So I think that's the weird
right.
Thing. Yeah, and maybe that relates to like it and even if maybe he's wrong about like using these cultures, but he's still loudly saying it. So I think it's a valid point.
And related, there's that scene where Alma finds that lady outside smoking, and they talk about how dance and like that sequence, just in particular, was very well animated of like her dancing throughout the days, and then it leads up to her jumping into the mirror. But like the usage of dance in there was very good. The actual animation of the tribal dance that she sees in that bar mitzvah was like I can't imagine the hell that it must have been to try to paint over that. But so the dancing was great, but yeah, just in general, the usage of indigenous culture in this show, I wouldn't be firm in saying it's a positive of the show necessarily.
So I think that's fair. I at least think it's extremely striking how big an aspect of the show indigenous cultures are, and I think it's like progressive in featuring them so much. And there's like indigenous characters, like they're not main characters, or at least Alma's Alma's family is part indigenous, so I think that's like I guess notable. But like they at least like that dancer at the end of episode 7. I agree, the end of episode 7 is incredible. That whole like dancing and flashbacks throughout that sequence. But I don't know. I found that to be super striking. I found it to be a big positive. I can see the other side of that and how much indigenous cultures are featured. Just so many cultures in general. I think episode 5 features 5 different languages being spoken. I think it's insane. Like this show is making such a conscious effort to be multicultural in a way that feels extremely genuine.
Yeah,
I would say, and for Alma herself. The bar mitzvah thing. I thought that was another standout joke of the show.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
what's this bar mitzvah's theme? Last bar mitzvah, my bar mitzvah's theme was cell phones. Like, okay, yeah, I think that's real. Is bar mitzvahs have crazy themes like that? I don't even know. Baseball, I think.
No, mine was definitely baseball.
That seems on brand.
Yeah, I think it was that. Okay.
I hate baseball. Mine was baseball.
Did you hate it at the time?
Yes, I 100% hated it at the time.
That sucks. Don't. Okay.
Because what kind of never mind, doesn't matter.
Also like Jewish culturally through Jacob, I thought that was also notable, and he talked about his family coming experiencing pogroms in the past in episode 5 as well, and he's like, we can go through it just so I could have a Christmas tree up. That was like part of that one scene I noted with them discussing cultures through Little Alma and like kind of half pick you up on what they're saying. I don't know, Sam. What else? What are anything else from the show? or characters we even discuss, or other things you liked or didn't like.
David Diggs. He was
Yes.
what was his name? Hold on.
Is David Diggs'
Tunde.
character the unproblematic fave?
I just like his face. He has a really nice smile.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in this. Raphael was a cameo. That was fun.
Yeah, he's laughing at the wedding toast, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so thumbs
Tyler
up on...
Posey, your fave.
Yeah, I had not enough Tyler Posey for me. I could have used more Tyler Posey as a priest. As a person who loved Teen Wolf, you needed more Tyler Posey, yes?
BTW, if you recognize Camilla, it's Constance Marie, and she played George Lopez's wife on the George Lopez show.
Oh, wow.
Yay.
Fun facts with Sam.
If you recognize Rosa Salazar, she played Alita Battle Angel.
I was too weirded out by her eyes being smaller than
I was
Oh my god.
Kate told me that she was Alita like halfway through the show, and I was so mad about that. It made me like incapable of watching her for like a few minutes.
I was also really impressed with Angelique Cabral's performance as Becca. I thought that was one of the best performances of the show as well. I'm really impressed with the Becca character, and especially in scenes with Alma. Yeah, Sam, anything else on Undone?
Well, first off, hot takes on cold foods. Mustard.
Yes, mustard. Yes.
Mustard.
Oh my god.
What about 7 different types of mustard?
Okay,
What about grainy
I've
mustard?
only tasted maybe 2 in my lifetime.
I was amazed they didn't say Dijon mustard at some point because I was expecting it.
So,
Dijon's too normal.
Not
I
fancy
feel like.
enough.
It's not fancy enough, but
Mm-mm.
I was still expecting it.
anyway, mustard. I like yellow mustard on certain things. Pretzels.
Yes.
Yeah.
Burgers, maybe. It's okay. Honey mustard I've really come around to in the past year.
Yeah.
Mm.
I
hate
didn't like
mustard.
honey-
It's fake
Whoa.
mustard.
Give me the condiments I do. Honey mustard's
Opposite
a really good
condiments.
dipping sauce, and I've come around
Mm-hmm.
to it. Those are the only 2 types of mustard I've ever had. I'm very uncultured.
Chicken wings and
Yeah.
honey mustard is heaven.
Yes. Other than that, Undone, again, I really like the show. I would say, yeah, the top animated series of the year for sure.
Sam's
Definitely.
number 1? Nice.
Sam, I don't know Sam's number. I have to reevaluate things. Also, the year's not over yet.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's only
Hopefully we still have BoJack to come. We'll
still
see.
got a couple. Like Super Drags last year came in like November. I was like, oh shit. Yeah, really like the show. You guys have given me a lot to think about, and I will continue thinking, and maybe I'll rewatch it again.
Yay.
But I have my fond memories of the time I spent watching it.
Yes. That's all we can ask for is fond memories.
Yes, that is
yeah.
all we can ask for. Just fond memories, which I guess the show is kind of about.
It's a lot about memories. Yeah, non-linear memories. Okay, yeah. I was thinking of doing this podcast non-linearly, but we didn't go through it then.
Thank God.
We should have. Alex, what are your final thoughts on linear podcasts and non-linear podcasts?
Non-linear has been played out. We need to stop. We've done all the good things we can do with non-linear. We can move on with other story dynamics.
Alex is anti-non-linear storytelling, so it's not surprising.
Yeah. Alma having feelings about the Alamo. I really appreciate
loved
it.
that.
That was a really
Yeah.
good scene from her, and I empathize with her anger at people writing history books. Daryl is a character that like that scene seems very off in terms of like if this is is this real then? Like he's doing this whole like I put it behind me, like I don't want to think about that time. But like he treats it like it's much more serious than it might.
I think it's real. His former girlfriend died, no matter what.
Yeah, her
no matter
dad
what she
killed
died.
his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who wrote on that line? Sam and Daryl equals Jets quarterback. Alex did, right?
Maybe. Anyways, the dad in the cave thing. Is that meant to be like some kind of religious parallel to Jesus because he's like wearing a white robe and he's coming
Maybe,
out of
yeah.
I mean, she was
Now
drawing a
it
picture
sounds
in
like
church. She was drawing a
Yeah.
picture when she was sitting in church.
Yeah, so it's like her dad is like her personal Jesus or something.
Wow.
Catholicism.
Yeah, Depeche Mode, good band.
Catholic.
Yeah, and I was Christian. So this show, After talking through this podcast, I have come around to the interpretation of it being mental illness. I think that you guys have put out a lot of different things that the show did to lay those seeds for if you want to see it in that way. I will say that it's definitely a show I would recommend people to watch because it does a lot of interesting things visually and thematically. It's definitely a show that touched on a lot of things personally, so I think that contributes to my very strange feelings towards it. And so I would say that I'm probably not representative of the majority of the audience, but if you've had family circumstances like the ones depicted in this show, I imagine that a lot of this will hit very close because of the fact that the characters are depicted so realistically in terms of how roundabout their actions are, as opposed to over the top, like say BoJack Horseman. Like these are portrayed a lot more realistically than that, and that in itself makes them more affecting when it's like, oh, I've seen my family do that before. So it's an interesting show. It's one that definitely gets a lot of emotions out of you if you pay close attention to it. The characters are great. So Undone is definitely a show that everyone should at least give a try and see how they react. But I definitely think that's one that would be fairly polarizing for people.
Yeah, I was surprised that the critical reception was so universally positive because I thought it would be a polarizing show too, at least because it's hitting on kind of societally controversial themes. But everyone critically seems to be loving it.
I mean, in the scope of animation, like this is one of the most ambitious shows that I think I've ever seen in terms of like
at the very least, I agree. Everyone should check it out just because it's so unique.
Right, and I think that contributes to critical consensus because obviously, like if you're a TV critic and you're dealing with watching a bunch of shows that deal with the same things over and over, and you get a show like this that's like looks different and talks about things differently than any other show, has diversity of characters that you don't get to see as often as you should. So like I can totally understand critics as a whole being like, okay, this show is the best of the year, like hands down. Like I can see that, and definitely there, as we've heard from the podcast, like there are many reasons to believe that.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Sarah, final thoughts.
I like the show. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. That wasn't Sam. Okay,
Wow,
Michelle, what are
you?
No, you had intricate, long thoughts.
I
on
did.
This.
I did too. I've already talked enough. I'm good.
Yeah, we were pretty deep in
Well,
that.
I don't
Michelle?
like. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
let's-
because I like a show doesn't mean that you get to shit on me when I don't like a show and I give a short response.
Yeah, that's true. I'm called.
I'm not being. I was.
I wasn't. This was a general response to. This was a general commentary on Sam's terseness sometimes at the end of podcasts. That's
Also,
all.
it's been
That's
like
all.
2 hours. I'm like good.
Also, I appreciate the shortness.
Really?
Of
Oh yeah.
Michelle, final thoughts.
I like this show. It's a good show. Yeah, the end.
Okay, thank you. This is Undone was great. I do think it's in contention for best show of the year. I recommend rewatching it. I don't know. This first Infinity Train, they're similar kind of miniseries type shows. First of all, I don't think that Undone could really have another season. I mean, I think it could do it, but it ended pretty definitive. It was an ambiguous ending, but it's like it's not going to be. It shouldn't be addressed. Like I think the show clearly doesn't want to address it. So I don't know how.
Like
to
I
do
could
a
see them
season
doing
two.
like sort of like Infinity Train, where like the next season's about a different people.
Yeah.
But like I don't want anything more with Alma. Even though I want more with Alma, they can't address this.
Yeah, maybe it could be Alma, but not directly after this or something.
Or
But yeah, it'd
just
be more of like
non-linear.
a
It's all the other stuff
tangential
happening at the
follow up
same
or
time.
more linear stuff.
I
That's
would
interesting.
rather just give these two co-creators more money to do an entirely different show now that they've proven themselves with this first attempt, Attempt and success, frankly. Just give them more money to do other stuff like everyone else.
Yeah, certainly they
last
should,
show.
and I definitely want to highlight Kate Purdy, who is clearly such an incredible writer. I mean, her work on BoJack was incredible. This show, she solo wrote episode 5, which is I think the standout of the show. Like I definitely am going to be eager to see what she's doing next.
Also, do I have right that she did Downer Ending on BoJack?
She did Downer Ending, and in an interview, she said Downer Ending was kind of the impetus for this show.
Good.
Really?
Is
Oh,
she
interesting.
kind of the
Wow.
non-linear ending to
Wow.
Downer Ending made her think about what if I do a show that's entirely like this?
That's
That's
good. That
interesting.
was my favorite. That's my favorite episode of BoJack.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's really good. I guess I want to close by again highlighting the animation and the rotoscoping. I like the faces. I can take some getting used to, especially like the hair and the lips and stuff. But like just the way it's used, like in terms of sequences stitching together and sequences different backgrounds and abstractness. Just like episode 2 starts you off with like a flashback of Alma, and then like her like transition to like her being older on the bed. It like goes right into that. She like ages up as it's going into the transition, and then you're just thrown into it from there. It's just brilliant. I just think the show is so gorgeous, so meticulously done. And, you know, for an animation podcast, I think this is totally a valid form of doing animated shows with this rotoscoping method. I think this is the perfect show for it, but I also think a ton of other stories could be told with this method. And I think Undone shows that this is like commercially viable for a TV show. You know, like the show is probably expensive, but it wasn't the most expensive thing. I think like this, we can do this for other things. I mean, maybe you don't have like I guess we should also highlight the director of Hisko Hulsing, like the rotoscope guy. So like maybe he can't do every show, but like I would like to see more rotoscope shows. And yeah, Undone was just gorgeous. And the fact that it is such kind of like deep characters and show on top of that too I think speaks to why a lot of us are thinking it's brilliant.
Yeah, shout out to Scanner Darkly and Loving Vincent, the rotoscoped pieces of work in recent years.
Yeah, we had talked about Loving Vincent, I think, on the podcast. So there you go. There's rotoscoping discussion on us. There's your 2 hour later correction for me in the beginning of the podcast. Let us know what you thought of Undone at comments on YouTube or on our website. And you can come to our Discord, or we have an Undone channel at overlyanimated.com/Discord. If you enjoyed this, consider supporting our podcast via Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Caroline, aka Princess, and Bojack, nickname for the Undone podcast. And thanks to our patron executive producers, Ryan, Steve Ox, Beatrice, Hugh, Michael, and Needle. We'll see if we have any further Undone podcasts at any point. I mean, I think this is a show that potentially warrants like any amount of discussion. It's like infinitely discussable. It's also just like hard to discuss and kind of exhausting. So I don't know, but we'll like this is. I'm really happy with our discussion, because a lot of us came in like, what are we going to say? Like this is a interesting and tough show, but I think we hit on a lot of great things. So thank you guys, and thank you all for listening. We will see you next time. Bye.
Hola.
Bye.
Bye.